Okay, welcome back, you guys. We'll finish up with chapter 26 here. First thing we need to discuss is the beginning of World War II, and note that the United States does not join immediately, similar to World War I. Okay, World War II is 1939 to 1945. U.S. involvement does not begin until 1941 with the attack on Pearl Harbor. If you remember back to last year in world history, we had a unit on the rise of fascism. Okay. Fascism is a totalitarian type of government. Remember the big five we did a lot of work with? Okay? Totalitarianism, using a lot of propaganda and censorship and having a common enemy, an enemy of the people, etc., etc. All right, so in Europe right now, we have several fascist leaders trying to expand their empires. We have Hitler in Germany, we have Mussolini in Italy, and we have Francisco Franco in France. All right, so the Depression is what opens this window for Hitler. Okay, the conditions of the Depression. Germans turned to Hitler last year. We elected him legally, if you recall, based on the circumstances. And the Nazis come in to power in 1933, same year as FDR, coincidentally. And Hitler revives the economy. Number one, by rebuilding the military, which was against the Treaty of Versailles. But the military puts a lot of people to work. Hitler officially rejects the Treaty of Versailles in 1936, and that is the same years in which he signs alliances with Italy and Japan and withdraws from the League of Nations. Okay, this will be called the Tripartite Pact. Germany, Italy, and Japan, all three nations who were upset with the Treaty of Versailles, bound together. The last thing Europe wants is a war, and England and France, being the two major powers, try to practice this policy right here called appeasement. Appeasement means to pacify or placate someone by accepting their demands. In other words, Hitler just kept expanding, taking little territory, and Great Britain, France, the United Nations responded by saying, okay, is that going to be it? Okay, we'll let you do this, because the last thing they wanted was war. So this policy of appeasement. Okay, Hitler continues to expand. He goes into the Rhineland. He goes into the Rhineland in 1936. That's land that they had lost after World War One. He goes into Austria, takes Austria. That's where he was born. He goes into the Sudetenland, also land that had been lost with good German people. And then we have the failure of the Munich conference, in which Hitler had promised he wouldn't take any more. And then, they appeased him, and he ends up taking all of Czechoslovakia. Hitler and Mussolini both helped Francisco Franco to win his civil war. All the while, across the pond, the United States is practicing isolationism because, again, the last thing we wanted was war. The majority of Americans were isolationists. As a matter of fact, they had some hearings about World War I and perhaps companies profiting off of war. They were labeled as merchants of death. Nothing really comes about of it, but it is the concern is there. And then we pass these neutrality acts, and the neutrality acts are all, again, in avoidance of war. The first one, 1935, says, okay, we're not gonna sell weapons to any belligerent. A belligerent is somebody at war, right? Because if you think back to World War One, that was how we got ourselves into the war. We were selling a lot of weapons to Germany and to Great Britain and France, and Germany became upset with that. The Second Neutrality Act of 1936 bans loans. We're not going to loan money to countries at war. Because again, World War I, we loaned a lot of money to Great Britain and France. It was in our best interest for them to win. And then the Neutrality Acts of 1937 bans U.S. citizens traveling on belligerent ships. I want you to think about the Lusitania there, and there were others. Okay, so we're trying to avoid war at all costs. However, 1937 Neutrality Act mandates cash and carry. You have to pay cash, again, no loans, and you have to carry your own weapons. They're not going to be going on American ships because when American ships get torpedoed, Americans get angry. Again, avoiding war. We see FDR start to change his tune. He realizes Hitler and Germany are a major threat. Before the war, FDR was an expansionist and an interventionist. After World War I, FDR shares these isolationist views. In other words, we do not want to try and create an empire that would cause a war. He promises he would not become involved in the European conflict. Okay, however, he sees the writing on the wall. Germany, Italy, and Japan, he labels the three bandit nations because all three are expanding and authoritarian. At the same time, Germany, we studied this last year, Kristallnacht, Night of the Broken Glass. Germany is openly persecuting its Jews. FDR is conscious. We have a lot of anti-Semitism here in the United States, which was evident with the St. Louis, in which the United States did not allow the St. Louis to dock. We did not take care of the fleeing Jews as refugees. We turned them away. And I believe 2/3 of them end up perishing during the Holocaust. All right, FDR, seeing the writing on the wall, like I said, starts to build our military up. All right, Poland and the outbreak of the war. Poland was the proverbial line in the sand. That was where the Allied powers, basically Great Britain and France, said, look, you keep reneging on your promises, appeasement isn't working, and if you go into Poland, then war is on. And of course, we know Hitler goes into Poland with his blitzkrieg strategy, and England and France declare war on Germany. The United States starts to slowly repeal the Neutrality Acts because FDR knows that they will need our help to defeat Hitler. FDR wants to aid allies with any methods short of war. Basically, we'll do anything but go to war. All right, what's going on in Japan and China? So we know Japan is expanding its empire. It was expanding. It's already got Korea. It's already got northern China, Manchuria, and it wants more. What's going on in China at this time is their own civil war between Jiang Jieshi, who was democratic, and Mao Zedong, who was communist. Okay, so they are actually fighting each other. As Japan starts to invade and further its empire in China, the two leaders, Jiang Jieshi and Mao Zedong, say, you know what, we got to call a truce because Japan is the bigger threat. So they actually join forces to fight Japan. I do need you to know that U.S.-Japanese relations are souring. There were a lot of different things that led to the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was not out of the blue, okay? We still have the immigration policies in 1924. I mean, the United States was racist, and we were racist towards Japanese people. We were suspicious of Japan in China, okay? We were suspicious of the Japanese taking our Philippines. All right. The Manchurian crisis, again, like I said, in 1931, Japan went into China in Manchuria. We're not happy with it. We give a little lecture and say bad Japan, but that's about all we can do. Why? Because we don't want war. FDR gives a quarantine speech. Basically, we've got to stop Japan. We're not willing to go to war. And then in the 1930s, the United States actually helps China in the form of loans, okay, to stop Japan. And FDR is careful in what he does because he knows Japan and Germany are allies. He does not want to provoke war. Okay, he realizes the U.S. is not prepared for war, even if it were to happen. All right, so we have a lot of foreign policy debate in these couple years that World War II had broken out, and until the United States was in it. American opinion was all over the place. We obviously favored the Allies, but the question was, how do we help them without going to war? Let's see here. Eventually, FDR moves the United States from neutrality to an undeclared war. In other words, we're doing everything possible to knock Germany out without declaring war, without violence. So it's a fine line that we're walking. Vigorous debate. Many Americans fear that if Great Britain falls, Germany could threaten the United States. All right. And at this point, FDR is calling isolationists. Like, if you're still wanting to be an isolationist, you're an ostrich. You've got your head in the sand. You're not seeing what's going on. All right. France falls rather quickly. And this also aids in FDR's decision to go from neutrality to undeclared war. In fall of 1940, the United States swaps 50 destroyers for 8 bases. All right, so we swap ships for empire. All right, these bases are former British colonies. And FDR, again, before the war, seeing the writing on the wall, has the first peacetime military draft. We're not in war yet, okay, but we have a draft. 16 million men sign up. In spring of 1941, we passed the Lend-Lease Act. Okay, these neutrality acts are out. Now we are going to loan, we said we weren't, but we're going to loan materials and allies, materials being war stuff, to any ally without entering the war. FDR orders the Navy to patrol our half of the Atlantic, and even offers a lend-lease to the Soviet Union after 1941. Okay, FDR, important to note, FDR wins re-election on the slogan, "Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign war." Okay, I will pick up with the Atlantic Charter in the next episode. That one will be a little bit shorter. Okay, thank you.